My next guest is an analyst, financial analyst. He comments on markets. He's an expert on gold and silver and conspiracy theories, which, you know, the rigging of gold and silver isn't a conspiracy theory anymore. Now it's a conspiracy fact. He was on the cutting edge of that. He also has roadtorooter.com, his popular website. I'm talking about Bix Weir. Bix Weir, thank you for coming to us from California.
Hey, Greg, it's nice to be with you again.
Incidentally, bravo. You and the guys at GATA and everybody else for years were wearing those tinfoil hats. And how dare you say that this was all rigged? Of course, it was rigged spectacularly more than anybody ever dreamed with, primary dealers of treasuries on both sides of the ocean doing the rigging. I'm talking about Deutsche Bank, and, they named Scotia Makata, the Bank of Nova Scotia, and HSBC, and I think UBS. Also, but anyway, bravo to that. You were for years have been saying this whole thing's been rigged, and it has been. So I wanted to go ahead.
This is the tip of the iceberg, though. The whole Deutsche Bank, they didn't come out and say that the charges being filed against them. They settled the case, but they came out and said, basically, in essence, that we're going to turn in other people who worked with us in this process. And you notice that none of the U.S. banks are in there. But it is opening some doors, and some people are starting to say, well, yeah, those tinfoil hat guys are more legit than we thought. But it's been the case for 10 years. We've had physical evidence and proof that the markets were being rigged. It's just that the mainstream media, I'd say they still aren't talking about the silver story, and one day they will be.
Well, when you say more legit, no, totally legit. No, not more legit. No, totally 100% accurate. You guys were 100% on the money accurate.
Okay, I'll take
totally, not a little bit more. No, totally. So I just want to point that out, because the advice was sound. People are like, well, I bought in 2011. Yeah, well, the debt exploded. I mean, the advice was sound, and they made it look like, but with fraud, they made it look like it was unsound advice, right?
Yeah, and you might want to give Jeffrey Christian a call and say, hey, for years you've been saying GATA was crazy, literally at every silver conference, and now what's he going to say? We were right all along. Is he going to say, gee, I'm sorry, GATA. I'm sorry, Chris Powell, Bill Murphy, and you guys. I was wrong. You guys were right, and my CPM group is complete nonsense, and we just spit out lies. He's not going to say that. He's going to just keep running his little scam.
Well, this is all part of the bigger picture, and the reason why they rigged it is to prop it up. Is to prop up a very sick system that's loaded with debt. And I wanted to bring up a few headlines that I told you in the pre-interview. You said, yeah, let's do that. And it really, I did this in my weekly news wrap-up on Friday, and I was talking about the stuff from Moody's and downgrading the debt of Saudi Arabia. The Senate passed this bill unanimously that they should release the papers and people should be allowed to sue Saudi Arabia, which I agree with, but that's dreadful news, right? In terms of the markets, brace yourself. There's going to be a reaction to that. But I agree with what the Senate did. I agree with releasing the papers and with the families. Also about that to go along with that downgrade from Moody's, that they're now, Saudi Arabia, paying their workers with IOUs. Well, might they cash in some of their assets because they need the money, and not because that they're basically mad that they released the 28 previously hidden pages of the 9/11 report and allowing families to sue them? Might they just have to cash in their money? Let's talk about that. Also, I want to see how that fits in with your timeline that you recently published on roadtorooter.com. Let's start with the Saudis.
Well, the Saudi Arabia issue and story and 9/11, you're absolutely right. Why did it take 15 years to get this information into the hands of the people? They are hiding so much when it comes to 9/11. It's really embarrassing these days. But with Saudi Arabia, Saudi was key to setting up the petrodollar when we went off the gold standard. Early 70s, Kissinger went into Saudi Arabia, signed some deals to make sure that Saudi Arabia not only sold their oil only in dollars, but they reinvested that into U.S. treasuries and the U.S. stock market. So that was the whole plan, is when you go off the gold standard, countries would have sold all their U.S. dollars, except they needed those dollars to buy oil because Saudi Arabia talked all of OPEC into selling oil only in dollars. That's been the key all along, the petrodollar. Now,
so when people say, well, the dollar's not backed by anything, backed by oil.
Well, no,
in a way, it's backed by oil because you need dollars. Well, you needed dollars at least up until now, and
right. Well,
now you need less of them.
It gave artificial support to the dollar because every country had to keep a certain amount of dollars in their reserves in order to buy oil. That was the key. And oil is the largest commodity bought and sold in the world, trillions of dollars every year. So all these countries, even though they hate the United States, have to keep U.S. dollars in their reserves so they could buy oil. That was the idea. Then it came along to the mid-'80s when all of a sudden what was setting the price of oil? You know, oil is consumed at, I think, 85, 90 million barrels per day. But on the COMEX with oil derivatives, the WTI trades 1.5 billion per day. It's one of those almost exactly the same to gold and silver. It's the derivatives that are added on top of oil that sets the price now. So if oil stopped flowing out of Saudi Arabia, it wouldn't matter because the derivatives set the price, not the supply and demand of oil. And that goes, unfortunately, that goes for the U.S. Treasury too. If Saudi Arabia is threatening us with $750 billion of U.S. Treasury, dumping their U.S. Treasury holdings, it doesn't matter. $600 billion in treasuries are traded every day, and that's not even the derivatives. If you go to the derivative side, it's hundreds of trillions. That's the key. The prices of everything, including the U.S. dollar, including oil, gold, and silver, and every commodity, is manipulated and rigged on the electronic derivatives market. All run out of the U.S. Treasury, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and it's completely not only legal, it is the job requirement of the Working Group on Financial Markets to control, to maintain market stability and to maintain investor confidence.
So does the trouble Saudi Arabia is into, whether it's the release of the papers and their being able, the ability to sue them, that's the incentive. The bill only allows to sue the families, the 3,000 families to sue Saudi Arabia for 9/11, nothing else. There's no other lawsuits available for anybody. But also Moody's downgrading their debt, them paying their workers in, paying people, their contractors in IOUs. Is any of that is that a warning sign to you? Is that something that fits in with your timeline? Because evidently your timeline isn't one that will, take us to new highs and we'll have nirvana. Your timeline is something quite different, correct?
Well, yeah, and it's funny because I get a lot of people saying they like my work because it's a happy ending story where the good guys take out the bad guys. There is no happy ending with everybody losing everything they have in the banks and the system collapsing and things like that.
But hold on just a minute. I want to back up to Saudi Arabia. Does Saudi Arabia fit in? The headlines with Saudi Arabia, does that fit into your timeline? Let's start with them. I mean, is that a warning sign? Is that a danger, Will Robinson?
Well, it's not a danger. It's a sign that what I call the good guys are beating the bad guys. The bad guys, that was part of their infrastructure, the Saudi Arabia oil petrodollar. And that was all part of the Bush clan and the Clinton clan getting together. That's how they ran their system. The fact that Saudi Arabia, we're not listening to that story anymore, and both Republican and Democrats are getting kind of pushed to the side. That's the key. Is these are all signals that the old system is breaking down, and there's new people and new controllers taking over the system that had run for at least 50 years.
So your time. Let's go now. Let's fast forward to your timeline. What is your timeline? What does it look like? Can you just give us some data plots on the timeline?
Sure. I tell this to everybody. I don't like doing timelines, but it's what everybody wants to know. Everybody wants to know what's my take on how this is all working out. And it's the timeline I put out was in January, and it had to do with the changing of the COMEX, gold and silver. Obviously, the COMEX is acting differently. Normally, when there's a huge short, they slam the price of silver down. It's the net commercial short is above 90,000 contracts, 450 million ounces, and they haven't been able to slam it down. They would have slammed it down long ago had they chose to do that. Now, the question is, who are they? Is it the market riggers now, or is it the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. Fed? I believe the market riggers have been taken out, and now it's the U.S. Treasury and the U.S. Fed running the game just to maintain the system, and they're going to maintain it through June. Into July, they're going to start really letting things go a little bit, and then come August, September is when I see the big crashes coming, and it all is in line with both the Republican and Democratic parties getting ousted, ending up with a single president. Probably Trump is what they want. The bad guys want Clinton, but they can take her down at any moment with all her crimes that she's committed. So kind of it comes into, it's happening now. It has been happening since the beginning of the year, and it will slowly emerge. And some of the big things on the timeline, I give certain keys to watch. One of the bigger things is the Deutsche Bank implosion. And that's just going to be gigantic, because Deutsche Bank is the largest derivative holder in the world, and their stock is plummeting, and they're begging for Tier 1 capital. And it's all happening right now. The question is, what is the day that Deutsche Bank throws up his arms and says, we're insolvent, and we're many times insolvent, and that would just destroy the European markets. It would destroy the U.S. markets, because our larger banks are all invested in all of the sovereign debt of the European countries. And that's kind of how it will start. I believe the very end of the end will be the Deutsche Bank implosion. And they're hugely into derivatives in gold, derivatives in silver, cocoa bonds, which is the convertible contingent convertible bonds. Those are bonds. It's debt that convert to equity when the bank starts to fail, and that's why Deutsche Bank is going after all these, paying huge interest rates on short-term money, because they need to raise their Tier 1 capital. Because as soon as these cocoa bonds convert, they're going to be, it'll dilute they changed from bonds to common shares, and that would massively dilute the share base, and everybody will be scrambling to get out of Deutsche Bank, and they can't have that right now. That's why they were buying back $6-7 billion worth of bonds back in February.
They came out last week or so and said that they were going to pay 5% interest rates, and I brought it up, and a couple of weeks ago I brought it up last week I brought it up with one of my interviews and said, how do they pay for that? How do they pay that rate? Where are they getting 5.5% so they can pay somebody 6% interest, or so they can even break even? Where are they getting a 5% rate where they can pay that? How are they paying 5%? You have to lock your money. It's pretty onerous. Well, and you're saying that them offering 5% is a sign of?
Well, the 5% offer is good until June 24th. June 24th is the last Friday in the second quarter. So that date, they didn't want to put it to the last day, because it would be obvious that they have to raise Tier 1 capital before they report for the second quarter. They're in massive trouble. Their Tier 1 capital is being destroyed by all these lawsuits. I mean, what, they lose 7 billion euros last year? Remember, when a leveraged bank is leveraged like they are, which is 10, 15 to 1, going up, it's great because you make 10 or 15 times the profit. Coming down is horrific, because you lose 10 to 15 times the amount of your Tier 1 capital. So you have to constantly build that Tier 1 capital when you have losses. And that's what's going on there now. And they don't have all the Basel agreements, and they're not going to be within the required limits of the Basel Accords. So they need to raise massive amounts of capital, and they're willing to pay 5% just to get past the second quarter. That's the amazing thing. This is just, it ends on the 24th. So anybody who invests in that, and I think it's 30-day minimum hold time or 90-day minimum hold time, you're not going to get to the end of the third quarter, because Deutsche Bank is going to be gone by the end of the third quarter.
So you think that Deutsche Bank is the key? You think that by the end of the third quarter, DB is gone, and we got some powerful, terrible stuff going on in August?
Yeah.
What is the end of the third? What is the end of the third quarter? It's September, right?
Yeah, the end of September.
Yeah.
And in my timeline, the end of September is kind of the D-Day, just like in 2008. Remember, it was like September 15th or 16th that Hank Paulson had to go in front of Congress. We're going to see the exact same thing this year. And it makes sense, because it's the end of the fiscal year for the U.S., and it's right in that time frame where they can get the people riled up enough to elect a president that they might not think is, in line with the Republicans or the Democrats.
Well, it's one of my pet peeves. I don't believe I don't believe in socialism or communism. I don't believe in any of that. But one of the things that Bernie Sanders talks about, which none of the mainstream, even people who are partial to him, but none of the mainstream press will bring this up. Fox won't bring it up. And his thoughts on the banks and that they should be, taken into receivership, and that these guys should be put out of business and they should be jailed. He's right on the money. Amen to that. But of course, he's a huge socialist, and his wife bankrupted the university she was running by all the free stuff. But anyway, that's the problem. But the banks, he's right about the banks. The banks, fraud. I mean, these conservatives are, well, we're conservative. Well, what about the banks and all this crime they commit and all the fines they commit and all that?
I think that's a very big part of the timeline. One of the problems with America right now is that we are completely divided. You've got the far left, which is people who love Trump, or the far right, people who love Trump. The far left, people who love Bernie. We need a common enemy. We need the banks to crash so that the whole country can become united. I think that's part of the plan and part of my timeline. I wrote an article that said a Trump-Sanders ticket would galvanize the nation. And you think right now it's like, no way that Trump's people will vote for Bernie's people and Bernie's people will vote for Trump's people. But what they're doing is they're building an infrastructure such that you get each side of the far right and the far left, you crash the system, and then you get rid of the Republicans and Democratic Party. Those parties are completely corrupt and a huge part of the problem. But both Trump and Sanders would rather go it alone anyway, and you put those two sides together in an emergency situation where you have a Deutsche Bank crash, you have the banks go down, you have people losing their 401k and all that. Our nation was built upon people who did not agree at all. Our founding fathers didn't agree with almost anything other than they had a common enemy in England, and they knew that they had to come together. But otherwise, they didn't agree on almost anything. And to get all those states to agree to come together as the United States, that's what's happening now. That's what our potential is, to bring our country together. Can you imagine a Sanders-Trump ticket where Sanders tells Trump, hey, you got to take care of the people. And Trump tells Sanders, hey, you got to take care of the economy and our national security. But we can work together, and let's all get together and do this together because we are the United States. We're not these crazy Republicans or crazy Democrats. We are one nation with a whole bunch of different people in it who have different ideas and beliefs, but we're going to stay one nation because we think it's the best for us. Otherwise, if you have Trump winning, half the country is going to go into revolution. If you have Bernie winning, half the country will go into revolution as well. They're coming at it from different angles, but it's getting to the same kind of polarity. If either one of these sides wins this time, the country is doomed. And I hate to say it, but you cannot go forward after this monetary crash with a country that's not united. And we have to unite with the far left and the far right and come together in the middle.
I want to come back to what the crash looks like in just a minute, but I don't know if there'll be a Trump-Sanders ticket, but there's lots of polling out there that shows that if Bernie Sanders isn't the nominee, and if they feel cheated, and I think they're feeling cheated, that's why you're having this big division out in Nevada, and they're getting these big upheavals. They know they're being screwed. Well, it's the rules. Well, the rules rig the system. And the rules, the super delegates, the phony delegates, the ones that the Democratic Party, and I'm telling you, Hillary looks weak to me. Whoa.
Well, they could take her out in a blink of an eye.
Well, I think she should be charged, and I think at least the information will come out. I've been saying she's going to get indicted because I think she looks weak, and I think the Democrats will say, we need to get rid of her. But I think they'd rather run Biden.
That's the amazing thing when they're talking about Bernie. They're saying, Bernie, why are you still running? Clinton could be gone tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
All it takes is the evidence is already public. You cannot let people do what she did with her emails and say, oh, the law doesn't apply to you.
And why she did it? She did it so she could take payoffs and sell favors through the State Department. But Sanders voters, there's a big percentage of them, something like 20% would admit, and I think it may be more, that they will vote for Trump. So you may not get that Sanders-Trump ticket, but you may get that Trump and Sanders voters coming together because I'm reading online that the Sanders people call Hillary Shillery. Now, how do you get the Sanders people to vote for Shillery And after they get, absolutely screwed and cheated, I mean, the DNC basically was in Hillary's pocket the whole time. How do you get those people to unite behind somebody they call Hillary? That's the whole. That's unbelievable.
But here's the problem with the scenario you're presenting. If Trump wins it alone, you're going to see a revolution overnight. You're going to see mass rioting in the streets because there are so many people disenfranchised and angry. And where is the anger going to be placed when people lose their 401k and checking account and savings account?
The banks.
The banks and the rich. You cannot have Trump leading us forward after that moment. You need both. You need the left and you need the right. And I think Sanders and Trump have some kind of back deal going on with the people who are leading their campaigns that they're going to come together when this chaos happens.
Well, that's a huge call, my friend.
It is, but either other scenario, and you can kiss the United States goodbye in a blink of an eye, because just ask any devout Bernie lover what he's going to do if Trump gets elected. A lot of them saying, "Well, I'm going to move out." Most of them are going to riot. They're going to absolutely riot, and it won't end.
Well, see, I think Trump and Sanders agree on the banks. Because, say what you want about Trump. He's not a fraudster. You've heard about that by now. If he was committing massive fraud and ripping and robbing people, and I'm not talking about Trump University either, but he's not a fraudster.
The key is to these guys.
He's shrewd.
They both love their country. They both love their country. They approach it in different ways, but they both love their country. And both of them are not in either Democratic or the Republican Party. They aren't party people. The parties have been fighting them. This is the end of the Republicans and the Democrats. This is the very last election that there will be Republicans and Democrats. Our system was not set up to be a two-choice type of thing. We're a republic, not a democracy. A democracy is where people get to vote for, the majority gets to vote to take rights away from the minority. That we're a republic where it's the individual rights that are more important than what the majority thinks. And in order to foster that, in order to move forward, you cannot have the left winning or the right winning this time. Times have changed. And I'm sorry, but those people, and I am a big Trump supporter. I don't agree with everything. I think, and I'm a big Bernie supporter also on certain issues. Communism doesn't work. Socialism doesn't work. Just look at Venezuela. It works until you run out of other people's money. That's the greatest line ever. But if you put those two sides together, Bernie is perfect for healing the people who have been disenfranchised. And Trump is perfect for being a strong leader and negotiating new trade agreements with our people who might or might not be our friends in the future after we crash the system. It has to happen. Because if it's either one of the other, the other side of the country is going to go into complete riot and revolution. The Bernie and Trump ticket has to happen. It's the only way to save the republic. Just like back when we were founding our country, nobody agreed on anything, but they did agree to unite against the common enemy.
Well, Bernie Sanders is an independent. He's not a Democrat.
Well, Trump is not a Republican. Trump was never a Republican. They're both completely outside the system.
Okay, listen, that's very interesting. That's very, very interesting. I'm smiling because this is great content. I want to get back to the crash and the timeline. So you think the timeline is we're gonna trend down until this fall, September, October. Talk about the timeline and the crescendo point, the crash, and then talk about what it looks like to the man on the street. Let's talk about the timeline getting into September. What does that look like?
Well, it looks like just what we're seeing right now: volatility in the markets, but even keel. I mean, it'll go up, it'll go down. The Fed and the Treasury, out of the basement of the U.S. Treasury, is controlling all markets with computer programs. I've proved this a zillion times with the programs that Alan Greenspan wrote in the 1960s and 1970s. It's always been the plan to destroy the dollar and go back to a gold standard. Right now, everything is on lockdown. You're not going to see wild spikes and wild crashes until the time is now to pull the plug. Right now, they're getting everything in line. They're taking out individuals, Bill Ackman, people like that who have gamed the system. They're taking out a lot of bad guys that Theranos company or whatever that thing is, the blood testing company that's being proved to be a fraud. You look at the board of directors; it's all U.S. military and Kissinger and those guys. I am afraid to even think about what was going on there, what the purpose was to get a little bit of everybody's blood in the United States. It scares me to the core, but that company's being taken out. There's all kinds of things trying to be put in place before they click that mouse and crash the system. So,
and you think they're going to click a mouse and they're going to crash the system?
Oh yeah, it's so easy to do. Computers are unbelievably powerful, and they're more powerful than we know today. There's some evidence that points to in the 70s and 80s, the U.S. military and the Treasury and the Fed had computers as powerful as they are today. They had that kind of power back then. So they're way ahead of the curve. And it's not, Silicon Valley doesn't have the most powerful computing power. It's the U.S. military, and it's the Fed and the Treasury. And the Fed they invented the first computer programs for the banking system. They invented the electronic chaos that we have now, as we call electronic blips asset. They invented it in the 1960s, and they implemented it in the 70s and 80s. This all comes down to one click of a mouse at the U.S. Treasury that says, okay, sell 10 billion shares of Deutsche Bank and don't stop selling until that bank goes down, and then you see the cascade of banks. It could be anything. It could be all of it at the same time. That's the key. The control for the entire electronic money system lies in the hands of the U.S. Treasury right now, with who's supposed to be reporting to the president, although it is up in the air as to who controls the president. So yeah, they can end it in a blink of an eye. And
what does the end look like?
It's to control it.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Right now, the idea is to control it and keep the system going until we get into mid to late summer, and then the plug is going to be pulled. Then the bad guys will be exposed. Then we have a bigger problem.
Well, just to finish up that before we get to the bigger problem, just hold that thought. Do we have an election?
I believe we will. It might not be traditional, but I do believe that's why they're trying to delay the crash now. Is they want to get to a time period when the system is in chaos, so that people they're going to kind of force Trump and Sanders together, both sides of the aisle, for the good of the country, to come together and unite the country, because we have to be united going into this. The problem with the Ron Paul revolution was it only dealt with one side of that coin. That's why they couldn't get him in there. Now they're saying, okay, we got both sides. We can pull them together when this crash happens. And then I do believe they're going to try to stick to or return to our constitutional form of government.
Okay, then how bad would this look? Tell me what the crash looks like to the man on the street. How bad? What happens the day after the crash? What are people going to see?
Well, see, the crash will be electronic. All electronic assets will be frozen and then wiped away. Exchanges will not be open. The DTCC will not be open. Nothing will be open, and nothing will reopen. We will go back to, we will get rid of the nanny state. That's the thing I'm talking about in my book, my newest book, is that we are being protected by these bad guys that control the system. We live in a nanny state. Everything is taken care of from our health care to Social Security to the air we breathe and the water we drink. Yes, they abuse the crap out of it all the time. But in the absence of them, we're going to have to take care of ourselves. That's the scariest part, is we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to take care of ourselves. If you crash the system, where do we get our power? Where do we get our communications? Where do we get our internet? There are studies that say, millions of people will die if the system falls apart. And that's why it's been allowed to be rigged and all the way to this point. But at some point, we have to grow up. We have to go out there and start a new life. It's going to be hard. It's going to be a lot harder than it is right now.
So any money that you think you have in the bank, poof, buy, gone. Any money, any stocks you have in a brokerage, poof, buy, gone. Your 401k, poof, buy, gone.
They're already gone. They're already gone. The stocks are not bought and sold and settled. It's electronic blips in your account. When you go to your Schwab account and you give them $1,000 to buy X amount of Apple stock, they don't go out and buy it from somebody else. They debit your account and they'll use that money in a different area. And that's proven. There's over 300 million failures to deliver every single day on the stock market. Failure to deliver is a contract that is never settled. No paperwork is signed, no documents, no exchange of money. These trades aren't happening. Everything that you think you own as far as a physical electronic asset is not there. They're not in your name. How do you think high frequency traders can do that? Do you think they sign over ownership of shares and then reverse that in a blink of an eye with 1 million trades a day? No, it is never recorded. And as long as the music keeps playing and people believe they have these electronic assets, that's fine. The moment the music stops, all the electronic assets, poof, they're gone.
So you're saying that these electronic trades, these I don't know, 1 million trades in a second, there's no way they could take possession of the shares and then turn around and sell the shares and lose possession of the shares in a blink of an eye. You saying that's the total fraud?
It is complete fraud, and it all started with the electronic trading and electronic settlement of this stuff. You can buy and sell and trade, and then what they gave the banks and the brokerage houses a net settlement. So at the end of the day, they net everything out. But during the day, everything can happen, and they can't even net it because the SEC says there's 300 million every day that never gets settled.
So you're saying the timeline kind of keeps, bad news, bad news, bad news, but it all stays together until the end of the third quarter. You're saying that Deutsche Bank will go under, other fireworks will go off at the end of the third quarter, and you're saying that the head of the Treasury is Jack Lew is going to be in front of Congress saying we need another bailout.
Definitely by September, but I think there's a lot that can happen between now and then. People can lose their checking account tomorrow, and the system might still be going on, and they might try the bail-in stuff. All this, there's so much that will be happening all this year. It's already started all this year up through September, and then you get to they need chaos going on during the election. They need the left and the right to get together. So I do think that there will be Jack Lew will go in front of Congress, but Congress is going to say no. They're not going to fall for another bailout. There's been too much information. In 2008, we weren't smart enough. We didn't know enough about what was going on to say no to the banksters, and they got their bailout. Today, ask anybody in the street, would you be in favor of a banker bailout? Every single one of them will say no. Now, if they lost their checking savings and all that, they'd say, I wouldn't be in favor of a banker bailout, but I'll be in favor of getting my money back. So there's going to be a big problem. And that's where the quagmire starts. And if we can't come together and unite, then you can kiss our country goodbye.
What happens to the gold market? What happens there? And silver market? What happens there between now? I mean, they've been trying to push it down, but they haven't been able to really kill it. I mean,
what gold market? What silver market? There will be no exchanges. If you take the banks down, there's no gold exchange. There's no COMEX. There's no LBMA. There's no Shanghai exchange.
But up until that time, what happens to the price of metals? Right now, my sources are saying people are buying it.
In the Gold Reserve Act, signed in 1934, it gave the Exchange Stabilization Fund 100% control of playing in or rigging the markets in gold, in foreign exchange, and in all other securities. A security is anything bought, sold, or traded. So basically, the U.S. government has 100% legal authority through the Working Group on Financial Markets to rig every market for as long as they want until they choose it's not in our best interest. That's the key.
When are they going to choose it's no longer in our best interest? Because there's going to be a day coming.
In the world. There's no way we're ever paying off this debt. We would win. If there's a crash in the monetary system and all electronic assets are wiped clean, we would win. Because we're the largest debtor nation in the world. That was always the plan. Everybody's like, oh, China will take over, or Russia will take over because they have these resources. We've got all the resources. We've been using electronic assets to purchase everybody else's oil and gold and copper and import it. Now, because we didn't want to use our own in the ground. Now we crash the system. We can use our own assets. Yeah, everybody would hate us, but we've got a strong enough military to at least protect our borders. Bring everybody home. Go it alone for a while. We're going to have to. That's always been the plan, and in the Fed documents, that's exactly what they're saying.
Well, that's the whole point of your road to root of sight too. That's the
Fed documents that they released in the 70s and 80s that shows exactly what's going on. That they intentionally are inflating the U.S. dollar to destroy it and return to a gold standard, because that's what we need, honest money.
How do people protect themselves then? And in this scenario where you lose all your money in your bank account, you lose your 401k, your retirement, your pensions, everything's gone. I mean, you're telling me that everything is gone after this crash. Is that right?
Yeah, everything electronic. Now, I would leave out Bitcoin because it's nobody's electronic IOU. There will be a time in the future when Bitcoin, shines, I do believe. But there will be attempts at recreating the system. Everybody loses everything. The first thing that Congress will do is try to give back everything to people and say, okay, we're just going to start fresh, and you'll start with the exact same amount of money. The problem there is the rich will still have the money. So there won't be agreement in Congress to reallocate money in the same way. Now, Alan Greenspan had a plan. It was to reallocate according to your Social Security balance, which is interesting because it gives those who have worked the hardest the most, but those who have already worked for so long will get some as well. And it's kind of fair because they cap Social Security. They stop pulling it out after like $110,000. I mean, that's kind of. But if even the Fed documents say that, but that might not work because you're going to have people agreeing on this stuff. And I think it's after the crash that we have to start worrying about. I talk about it in my book. What if we don't agree on how to go forward? How long will it take? How much pain? 2 years? I hear some people saying it's going to take at least 2 years just to reintroduce a currency. Can you survive for 2 years and using barter and not going anywhere, not trading with anybody but your local communities? Would the United States survive that? I don't know. We need to get together and agree and unite.
Bix Weir. So before I end it, just so the best thing you could do right now is what? Stop toilet paper and canned food and gold and maybe some paper currency. Is that what would you tell people to do?
You just said it. It's so obvious. And all you have to do is think about a world without the electronic system. No credit cards, no deliveries of food. Just-in-time delivery system won't be intact. What's going to matter? Protection, you're going to need a gun. And the U.S. government has been trying to get people into guns for a longest time. You notice they always say, oh, we're going to take the guns, but they never do. All it does is jack the sales up of guns and ammo. Now is the time to be out of the system completely. And hopefully there are people wiser than us that can get the country united. But, it's a crapshoot. It's up in the air. And if we don't unite, you can say goodbye to the United States of America and every other country in the world because it'll be mass chaos.
And when you say now is the time to be out of the system entirely, just to give you a few sentences on that, what do you mean by that?
If there is anybody between you and your asset, and first of all, your asset cannot be a credit obligation. Money in the bank is that you have to rely on the bank's credit and you have to rely on the FDIC, which is not solvent anyway. You need nobody between you and your assets. Don't store your gold and silver in somebody else's vault, because when the system falls down, the banks shut down, which is easy to show how that will happen. Nobody will be going to work to protect your assets. There will be no guards. The guards will actually walk into your vault and take the gold to protect their family. And that's the key, is have nobody between your assets and you, have enough food, water, storage, have a plan to how to handle this. And you might have to go mobile. That's the biggest problem with silver, is that physical silver, it's hard to be mobile with physical silver. Yeah, it might be worth a lot in barter, but it'll be a long time before stock markets and exchanges start up again because of the loss of trust. We run on a trust system. Once the trust is gone, so are our electronic markets and everything. Trust in our government, trust in our banking system, trust in our currency will all be gone.
Bix Weir, roadtoruta.com. I appreciate it. You can become a member. How much does it cost to become a member to Road to Ruta? You can get all this stuff in your fine work on roadtoruta.com. What's your membership fee?
Well, it's free for the email blast, but the membership fee is $199 for a year, and you get access to everything. I do have a new book coming out. Book 4 should come out in June, where I talk about all this stuff, but mainly focuses on what happens after this crash and where can we go and how do we unite.
Bix Weir, roadtoruta.com. Thanks for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com and giving us your timeline and roadmap up into the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth quarter of 2016. Thank you very much for enjoying it, for taking us to school and joining us.
Thank you, Greg.